here. Okay. Whose music is playing in the background there?
Oh,
Is that Zara? Okay.
I may have a little light jazz playing.
Okay. All right, very good. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to do the opening prayers tonight. The altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang war je pe dra no par je pe ge. Dar pa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang tem. Dug now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe shang ju brin po she to pa Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Transcend Sawadangur Parje Pe Pal Dan Lama Dampa Namla Kyabsu Chio. Yedam kil gorgi la sok nam la kapsu chio. Sange chom den de nam la kapsu chio. Dam pe cho nam la kapsu chio. Apege du nam la kapsu chio. Awo kadro jo kyong song me song yeshe gi cheng dang dem pa nam la kab su chi o. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed along the Bodhisattva path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Shang Shu Ning Po Chi Ki Ba Sangye Nam La Kyab Su Chi Chodang Shang Shu Sampa Yi So Klang De Shin Kyab Su Chi Jeta Nongi De Shegi Shang Shu Tugni Ke Padan Shang Shu Sampe La Pala De Dag Rim Shin E Patar De Shin Zhou La Pandandu Shang Shu Sam Ni Ke Gishin De Shin Du Ni La Pala Rinpa Shin Du La Pa Ji O. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chodam La Shang Shu Bai Du Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Jin Soki Pe So Nam Gi Trola Penshir Sangye Ju Pa Sho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesam chantam she de wadang dewe gurdang dempa jorchi. Dug now dang do now gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dug now me pe de wadang midra war Georgie. Nay ring jagdang ni dang drawe tang namla ne pa Georgie. the 100-syllable purification mantra of Vajrasattva. Om Vajrasattva Samaya. Help to protect my vow, to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind-heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the four joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus, I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Dristadredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sarasiddhi Me Prayatsa Sara karma sitsame sitsan shriya kuru hung ha 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 ho bhagavan Sara tada gata bajra mame mansa bajri bhava mahasamaya satvaha Om Bajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Dristadredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sarasiddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sitsame Sitsan Shriya Kuruham Ha 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 ho bhagavan Saratada gata bajra mame mansa bajri bhava mahasamaya satvaha Om bajra sattva samaya manupalaya Bajra sattva tenopa dristadredo me bhava Suto kayo me bhava, supo kayo me bhava, anuraktu me bhava, sarasiddhi me prayatsa, sara karma sutsa me, sitsan shriya kuruham, ha 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 ho bhagavan, Saratada gata bajra mame munsa bajri bhava mahasamaya satvaha. Page 12, the Sigarimati Requested Sutra. Likewise be extinguished all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food and drink peacefully, enjoy it, and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the maras be purified. As a result, may all the maras be defeated. Thank you very much. So before we get started, does anybody have questions or comments about anything that we've talked about?
I have a technical question on the opening prayers. Are we supposed to recite the titles as we read them? Because I noticed you did it for the 100-syllable. Is that just the choice you make?
Yeah, just the choice, just to make sure everybody was on the same page.
Cool. Okay, and then on page 9 for the 100-syllable in Tibetan, You recited that one 3 times, but when you recite it in English, does that not count towards the 3 times? Like once in English?
It's really just arbitrary. I recite it. We usually recite these prayers 3 times.
Right.
And so I want to, reinforce, people getting the melody for the 100 syllable purification.
It was
So
helpful. It was definitely helpful. It was more of just for my personal practice if there was something more prescribed.
yeah, no, it's not nothing. Anything is cast in stone. It's whatever helps you to progress in your memorization and your recitations.
Okay. And then I did have one more question. And I don't know if you've already answered this, and forgive me if it's a repeated question. For the Sagaramati requested sutra, why is it always just in English? Is that just your dealer's choice?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Did you have any other questions? Because we talked a little bit about the language things on Sunday. Did you have something that you wanted to put to Bernie or to clarify anything?
When we spoke yesterday after class, I think that helped me a little bit. Bernie, I had questions about the nature of some of the words, like breaking down the root words and the combination words to understand the literal meaning of each aspect that came to make the compound words in the Tibetan, just so I could understand the actual literal meaning in the original language. And Lance had mentioned you may be a good resource for maybe books or other ways I could self-educate and self-study the language.
Oh, Tibetan is complicated. There are books, probably the best books are either from the Library of Tibetan Works, which is the official Tibetan archive of Tibetan texts, and also the University of Virginia has a Tibetan language study program, and they put out a couple textbooks. So those would be the best sources of information. And but the first thing to do is just to learn the alphabet, and you can find that online. So
It's in our prayer book.
it's in the prayer book too. Okay.
Prayer
Yeah,
book?
it's in the inside back cover of our prayer book is the alphabet and how to how to make the letters.
So the difficult part about Tibetan is that letters combine with each other. They stack more than in Sanskrit and Devanagari. And when you combine letters, they change the sound. Generally, in Tibetan, you have what's known as open syllables, which means not always, but more often you have syllables that end in a vowel than in a consonant. And generally, when you see more than one consonant in a compound, in a syllable, it's generally the one with the stacked letters that you pronounce, and the one before it is silent. And well, I won't go into it all right now because it would be too complicated, but the initial letters G, D, B, M, and little a, when you see them at the start of a Tibetan syllable, are always silent. And I made up a little, the mnemonic for that, which is grave diggers bury many artists. So that's how I remember the letters.
I have to write that down. Hold on. Grave diggers bury many artists. Okay.
Yeah, so when you see a G, when you see all the letters in the Tibetan syllable written out, if it starts with a G, D, B, M, or a little a, which is usually represented in English as an apostrophe, then it's silent. Okay.
That's a possessive, something possessive, the little a.
No, okay.
Well, let's not go too far into this.
It gets complicated. It gets complicated.
All
So
grave
first you
diggers.
learn the alphabet, then you learn the compound letters, and then you start to learn the words because you have to know the alphabet and how letters go together before you can start learning the vocabulary. The nice thing about Tibetan is there's no complicated grammars. You don't conjugate the verbs really, and you don't have, there's gender, but it's not very important in Tibetan. So yeah, the grammar is simple, but the spelling is wickedly complicated. So
you have to learn the symbols, and then the symbols represent the letters.
the letters, yeah, the symbols represent the letters. I understood originally the letters weren't silent, but it's like English. A lot of times the letters became silent over the years. So you'll see a very long name in English, which is really, you don't
Did you
pronounce.
stop recording, Matt?
You
Oh,
asked him to.
I didn't ask him to. I just posed the question.
Oh, I think he took you literally because he stopped it after you said that.
I thought you had asked me to stop it or something for some reason.
No, I didn't see the prompt
Okay.
for the recording, so I thought you had stopped it. Okay. So those of you watching on YouTube, we just had a moment there where we were discussing some language issues, and we're going to have some language conversations in a couple of weeks when we finish this part of the Jewel Ornament Liberation. So thank you all for joining. And before I forget, I just want to say that we're going to start the Noble Film Night very soon. So on Friday night. So if that's convenient for everybody, that'll be great. So it'll be 7:00, and it should be really wonderful. Okay. So unless anybody has any other comments or questions. All right. So I want to reestablish our train of thought where we were when we left off last time. We were talking about Bodhicitta in the Jewel Ornamental Liberation, chapter 9 of the Jewel Ornamental Liberation. And this is the antidote for not knowing the method of practice. So generally speaking, what we're talking about is creating a structure. There's a structure to the practice. There's a structure to reciting these prayers. There's a structure for what the prayers are and so on. And these are the things that we're talking about, the structure. So, and the structure is what reinforces your time, your commitment to be able to do that. It's a support for your practice, for understanding, getting inside of yourself, literally finding your pure natural self, your big mind, which is very, very, very subtle. So having this structure helps us to be able to identify different elements of what's obstructing us from getting into that big mind, and then what the elements are within the big mind that we want to be able to stabilize. So stabilization is really the goal in every single stage that we go through to be able to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma, is stabilization in that. So each level has that stabilization. So in other words, we may not be able to get to the very top level and hope to be able to stabilize it if we haven't stabilized the things at the foundational level. So we have to start at that foundational level and work up. And this is why we repeat these things over and over again. So the thing that's important is that there's independent, private, personal study that you're doing, that you're engaging in order to stabilize those fundamentals, those things that we repeat all the time. So we talked about that yesterday, we talked about it last week, and so on, what those things are. So I'm not going to repeat that right now, but it's from that basis of what we're trying to do, structure, reinforcement, and stabilization, which is what we're trying to present to everybody so that they can become on the path, that they can become practitioners, not just hearers, but practitioners. So there's a big difference. So where we left off, we were talking about these 22 similes of the Bodhisattva, of Bodhicitta, excuse me, the 21 similes of Bodhicitta. And this was on page 15 of the outline book that we prepared for these talks, which is the outline of the Jewel Ornamental Liberation. So just reminding everybody where we are. So we're at the bottom of the page, toward the bottom of the page, where it says the Buddha's level. So what we have gone through so far, we're talking about bodhicitta. So we're looking at bodhicitta at the different levels. First, there's the ordinary level that applies to all beings. Very general statement that there's 3 statements here that are listed here. So the ordinary level. Then there is the practitioner level. So there are statements here that talk about the application, how we are applying this. We are trying to accumulate. We are trying to apply what we are learning, what we are developing, the bodhicitta that we are developing. So the practitioner level. And then there is the yogi or the yogini level, which is the level of being in union with us, becoming the embodiment of the Dharma, becoming the embodiment of the bodhicitta. It becomes effortless at this point. At the practitioner level, we're working to make it effortless, but we're giving it effort in order to do that. We're thinking about it, we're practicing it over and over again until it becomes effortless for us. Then we enter into that yogi yogini level and so on. Then we go to what we would call the bodhisattva level, the holy enlightened being level. And there, now we are purifying the very subtleties of our body, our speech, and our mind. We're purifying the emotions. We're cutting off the emotions. We're controlling the emotions instead of letting the emotions control us. So we move beyond the emotions. We are talking about the mental misconceptions, that we start looking at what wisdom is and what wisdom is not, and being able to make decisions as to how we are going to follow, how we are going to maintain this structure and what this structure does for us and so on. And we're purifying the things that are in the structure that maybe don't need to be in the structure at this point. Things get more subtle, they get more quiet, they get simpler. So there might be certain parts of the structure that aren't necessary anymore. So we learn to purify those things. And then there are the habitual tendencies, these habits that we have from many lifetimes and from this lifetime. And we begin to recognize the causes of those habitual tendencies. And we learn how to be able to control those habitual tendencies and eliminate the negativities, eliminate the chasing, and replace them with positive, and reinforce that as the embodiment, as our embodiment of our pure nature of the bodhicitta. So all enlightened beings have this bodhicitta within themselves. So the bodhisattva level is working on the path of that purification. Then that's what we talked about last week. So now we are at the Buddha level. What does bodhicitta mean at the Buddha level? So for us, we may have a glimpse of this, but for us to be stable in that, is I don't want to say it's impossible, but it would be difficult to be stable, to hold it. But nevertheless, we use it as a goal for ourselves. We move towards that. And every now and again, we have to remind ourselves of what our goal is. So it's wise to be able to read these 22 similes to keep us moving forward, not letting us get lazy and so on like that. So the first of the Bodhisattva, Buddha's level of Bodhicitta is number 20 of these 23. And it says, possessing the grove of Dharma. Possessing the grove of Dharma is like hearing elegant sounds. Proclaim a beautiful song to trainees who wish to achieve liberation. So there's a couple of phrases here that can be very, very useful to us. The grove of Dharma. So Dharma is a pathway, right? And capital D Dharma is the pathway, is the teaching of the Buddha, the pathway to become enlightened and so on. And it has many different parts to it, many different elements to it. So we could think of this as entering a grove of trees. It's not a big forest. It's not a big woods or anything like that, but it's a grove. It's well manicured. You can walk in between. There's all the weeds have been taken out and so on like that. And here are these beautiful trees that each tree represents a different aspect of the Dharma. This is the grove of the Dharma. So this is talking about what it is to be Buddha, what it is to be awakened. We all have this within ourselves. So, and it's possible in our lifetime. It's possible in our lifetime to have glimpses of this and to work at this. So it's not something we have to wait for to die to be able to have or something like that. It's not something that descends upon us and in some way from outside of ourselves. It is within us, and it begins to grow, and we begin to radiate this. So this grove of Dharma is like these grove of beautiful, magnificent trees in this well-manicured grove. Is like hearing elegant sounds. Now, hearing these elegant sounds and being surrounded by them is like being in a magnificent orchestra or a symphony or a choir, something like that, these magnificent sounds. But it's larger than that. It's like hearing everything as sounds of bodhicitta, sounds of the Dharma, sounds of what it is to be Buddha. That all this is a song of the Buddha, a song of being enlightened. And that everything, even the things that would appear to be discordant, would be just noise at a lower level. At this level, everything harmonizes. Everything is the same. So it's like being in an orchestra. It's being in the midst of a symphony. It's being in the midst of a choir where you can hear all these individual instruments, all these individual voices, all coming together and blending together and creating this magnificent song, if you will, this piece of music that we hear. And this is being in the midst of this grove of Dharma, hearing the elegant sounds. So proclaiming a beautiful song to trainees who wish to achieve liberation. So we see everything as part of this song, even the things that don't seem to be a part of what it is. You know, they're a new note or something like that, a different chord that you've never heard before or something like that, but seeing it as all part of that song. The next one at the Buddha level is simile number 21, which says, possessing the path of one direction is like current of a river, benefiting others without being diverted from its path. So here are some wonderful phrases here. Possessing the path of one direction, the path of one direction. At this point, the Buddha is only moving in one direction, which is actually omnidirectional. You know, It's you could say it's forward, which implies it's coming from something in the back, but we so many times in all the different practices and prayers, we talk about everything being in the 10 directions. It's omnidirectional. It's moving in all directions. It's like a sphere. There's the center, and then from the center, it's all radiating in all directions and so on. The path of one direction, maybe thinking of it as moving outward rather than coming inward, moving outward. That would be an apt description of one direction, like the rays of the sun, which we use as an analogy all the time, is like a current in a river. So the current in a river, is you can't divert it. The power of the river coming down. It would take phenomenal force to be able to change the banks of the river, to change the direction of the river, and so on. So in this way, the Buddha Dharma is being, likened to that flow of the river that can't be changed. So that's how this is referred to here. Which says that it is benefiting others without being diverted from its path. So this is like replacing negativity, that everything that is happening is replacing negativity. And maybe replacing is not quite the right word. The word that I always think of is it's neutralizing negativity. It's neutralizing positivity. It's neither becoming positive, it's neither becoming negative, it's neutralizing it. So that you're not attached or have aversion to either side. It becomes peaceful, it becomes quiet. So this is the path of one direction. And number 22, or number 22 here, it says, possessing Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya is the body of the Dharma. The body of the Dharma. Dharmakaya. The body of the Dharma is like a cloud, manifesting, abiding in Tushita heaven, and so forth, on which all benefit for sentient beings depend. So possessing Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya is the Dharma body of the Buddha. So all this, the way we describe this, it all issues forth. All this that we see, this phenomenal nature, all this that we're involved in, is the display of that Dharmakaya, which is non-dual, which is non-conceptual, which is non-objectifiable. It's beyond our comprehension as human beings. But it's like a cloud. This Dharmakaya is like a cloud from which this rain falls. And this rain is that display, is the nurturing display that is helping beings to receive that rain, to be able to nurture their growth, to be able to manifest the Dharmakaya within themselves, to recognize the Dharmakaya, to be able to grow that. So it's like a cloud that is issuing this rain that is coming down, this display. So this is a simile for what the Buddha Dharmakaya is about, is like. So manifesting in Tushita heaven. So Tushita heaven is in the and I'm not an expert with this, I'm not a very good scholar, but I've been introduced to a number of these things that I do recognize. And Tushita heaven is the heaven from which Buddha Shakyamuni comes from. And he actually went, and when his mother passed, if you remember the story of the Buddha, that his mother passed away 7 days after she gave birth to the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and she went to Tushita heaven. And during his lifetime, the Buddha Shakyamuni went to Tushita heaven and taught his mother and taught the gods that were there in this heaven and so on that were there, taught them the Dharma. And so there's a whole thing about that in Buddhism, you know, of his going to Tushita heaven and descending, coming back to this world in order to continue his teaching, continue his work as it is that he was doing here in this world and so on. So this Tushita heaven is implies that there is this level of holiness, of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. There is this level that we become as the Buddha, who is continuing work, who is like stabilizing that radiance. It's like the final part of the Buddha before the Buddha no longer is the Buddha. It becomes totally non-conceptual. Buddha is a concept, something that was created by human beings in order to communicate this transcendence that we have and so on. So this Tushita heaven represents that Buddha field of the Buddha who is here and is stabilizing this Dharmakaya for the benefit of all these beings. And when this is all done, then, you know, what goes beyond that is beyond our imaginations and so on, beyond our knowledge. So this is Tushita heaven. So this is like a cloud. So that cloud is coming from Tushita heaven, that rain from Tushita heaven, bringing down the Buddha Dharma to us. So you see how dramatic this can be, at least the way I can portray it. It can be very dramatic, but it's really very, 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 very subtle. It's very subtle. And to be able to capture it, you know, if only for a moment, to get a glimpse of it, requires your subtlety, requires your quietude, your peacefulness and so on to be able to get that. So this is what we aspire to. This Tushita heaven is something that we aspire to. When we talk about aspiration, that we aspire to be like that, you know. Are there any questions or comments about this? Any thoughts about this?
When people are transitioning between like the good actions of a bodhisattva and then into the Buddha, is there a crossover point that's been described where there's something that either visceral or experiential?
We talk about it in the Nyingma tradition, in the Dzogchen tradition, they talk about it as the cutting through and the crossing over. The cutting through and the crossing over.
That's how they say it? Like that's the referencing? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the English translation for it, you know? So let your imagination, you know, meditate on that. Think about that. Maybe Bernie has something to add to that, you know, without getting into, I didn't want to get into the technical names for it, but it's the cutting through and the crossing over.
Yeah. And in Dzogchen, they generally talk about two different levels of the practice, where the cutting through is the preliminary practices, where you're preparing yourself for resting in the enlightened nature, and the second, I forget, cutting through, Tekchod is cutting through, and the other one is, I forget. My memory is pretty poor that night. So anyway, the second is just generally an enhance. You cut through until you have the experience of natural mind, and then you rest in that experience, and you need to enhance it because it's kind of weak. And the enhancement is the second set, which is a different set of exercises.
Well, it's Treksho. Treksho is the cutting through.
cutting through.
And Togyal is
Togyal is
the crossing
Tokyo,
over.
that's the word.
Is the crossing over.
Crossing over, and that's particular to Dzogchen. Mahamudra describes it somewhat differently, but generally the idea is first you need to have the experience of an enlightened mind, and then you need to stabilize it and enhance it. That's pretty abstract, but that's the general process of doing it. And there's a number of different exercises to do that. And generally, they call these sort of things self-secret, because until you're ready for what the exercise, it's not going to make any sense to you. So, or it's not going to make complete sense, or you're going to misunderstand it. So that when you talk about Mahamudra and Dzogchen, they just call them sort of self-secret teachings. So, as opposed to Tantra, which can be understood and are kept secret, because if they're misapplied, they can damage you. So,
Have either one of you been intentional about cutting through and crossing over?
well,
Like where you've gone through this process,
I've
you've come
done
back,
some
you come
of
back
the
and forth out of
traditional
a great
exercises with Khandro Rinpoche. I can't say that I really was tremendously successful at them, but I know what the basic exercises are. And they're just basically the idea of coming through conceptual mind and trying to show us that conceptual mind is limited. That's the basic idea of Trekchö. I know a little bit about Togyal, but I've heard a little bit described, but I have no practical experience with it. So I'm not going to talk about it, because I've been told not to talk about things I don't have personal experience with. So,
seems wise.
but I mean, it's not, I mean, the important stuff is first to have a basis in good conduct, have a strong sense of bodhicitta, and from that have a strong meditation of shamatha. These are the bases. And without that, if you try to do the higher practices or try to jump too high, you're not going to get anything out of the practices.
Can you repeat that? Like you said good conduct, and then what was the second thing you said?
Bodhicitta. Good conduct first, bodhicitta second.
Amen.
Third, just basic meditation practice, shamatha meditation practice. Without those three, you're not going to get far with any kind of advanced practice. Of course, there's also the deity yoga practices, which are also important, but they're really just another kind of shamatha. You're just concentrating on the deity rather than what's usually done in shamatha, which is concentrating on your breath. Anyway, that's my opinion. Maybe Lance has something to add to that.
I think Brendan had a question. I don't want to cut off other people's curiosity.
Oh, I'd love to hear it. So I want to make sure I've got this right. It's good conduct, strong sense of bodhicitta, and then the shamatha meditation practice. Is that correct?
That's the basis for higher practice, and you really should be emphasizing that, or we all should be emphasizing that. So,
And what was the advanced that would hurt you, could damage you if you weren't ready for
in
it?
Tantra, there are certain practices which involve yogic positions and breath concentration, and if they're not done correctly, they can hurt your health, or they can.
When we say that they can't hurt you, it can upset your attitude.
It can do a lot of things.
You can lose faith. You can lose focus, you can give it up, and you can talk bad about it, you can think bad about it. This is the way in which it hurts you. Lightning isn't going to strike.
Lightning's not going to strike you,
that.
but I can tell you a story about a woman who was part of the Tibetan Dharma house before Lance was involved with that particular group. She went off to India and decided that she was going to practice chod practice in retreat. And in chod practice, you do a visualization where you cut your body into pieces and you offer it to all the demons that are out there.
But it's imaginary.
Imagine the demons there and imagine it. So she did this, and then she had the belief, or she came down with the idea that she was really being attacked by demons. And she got very frightened by that because she wasn't ready to do that practice. The practice is that it's a practice of self-sacrifice. But when it really happened to her, when she had the sense that the demons were actually there and that they were accepting her offering of her body, it just scared her so much that she had to leave her practice, and was a terrible situation.
It's like a bad trip, huh?
It was like a bad trip, exactly. It was like a bad trip, exactly.
So,
I don't know
there's
how-
something that, I learned a little while ago, several years ago, about superstition and seeing how superstition is pervasive in different cultures, in these different cultures and so on. So a lot of this is you can chalk up to superstition. It's really, I tend to simplify things, and but putting that into your bag of lenses of how to look at reality, to look at how we live, to look at what we're doing and experiencing, to look at the superstition that we follow, and to make decisions to cut that off. So that's an important thing.
Yeah, well, it's true. But when you hear a strange noise in the middle of the night, sometimes it's hard not to get spooked, even as rational as you convince yourself that you
Well,
really are.
well, we don't need to go into this right now.
Yeah, people are really not so rational when you go down deep into their psyche, so
Right.
you might think that you're more rational than you actually are. So you got to be careful.
Turn all the lights, and the boogeyman comes out.
At a certain level, we're all still just kids. We're all still just kids. And we've got the same fears that we had when we were a kid.
Well, thank you so much for answering some of that, both of you, and Brendan also for your question. Thank you.
Something you might want to check out there is, or anyone else, kind of related to the crossing over, is we just listening to, I had there's a audio book version of it, but from Mingyur Rinpoche's, is it, I can't remember what it's called now, Falling in Love with the World or In Love with the World, where at the end it's about, I don't go through on top of it, it's about when he took the wandering retreat and went off, but where he's dying at the end of the book. And I mean, obviously he ends up living, but he's going through all the dissolutions and all the death processes are happening, and he's narrating it in the book, and then where he comes into and he's crossing over and feeling like the luminosity of like the original mind and everything, and it's going through that process in a way that was really amazing. And I just listening to it today and gave me great faith, and was quite spectacular how he described it. I don't want to get us too off track, but it's making me think of that, what you're saying, the crossing over. I know you're talking about the relative bodhicitta to I don't know, the Dharmakaya or more or Buddha mind or something, and it's I think that could be relevant to what you were talking about. It was like reading it was like taking a trip, was like tripping. It was pretty wild.
What's the name of the book?
In Love with the World, I think.
I'll find it. That's Matt, that's actually really helpful. So Lance and Bernie, is that pretty accurate? So then it's like almost a death of the conceptual mind as you literally are crossing over into becoming Buddha, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't say from my experience. I can just say what the books describe in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, obviously. So that's the way it's described, that basically your mind collapsed. Basically, the idea is that during our life, we have energies in the central channel, which is our spine, basically, or like around our spine. And there's the one energy at our top of our head, and there's the other down around our sexual organs, And what happens at death, the wind within the central channel just dies down So the two energies that were kept apart during life just sort of come down. One rises up, the other goes down to the heart. And when they join like that, that's the most fundamental state of mind. Maybe Lance could give a better description. So at the moment of death, if you're prepared to understand it, you have a very profound meditative experience. Now, what happens to most people is that they're not ready for this kind of experience, so they just lapse into an unconscious state and they miss it. That's what the books describe. Obviously, I don't know from personal experience, but
Wow, that's incredibly, like, that's huge, like, for me to hear you describe it that way. Like, that requires probably so much, like, awareness of what's happening in your mind, body, and
and
spirit.
apparently Mingyur Rinpoche had enough meditation that he could maintain his consciousness while this process happened. So he was near death, but obviously he didn't die. I forget what was wrong with him, but he got very, very ill and he was in the hospital. And because he could stabilize that experience, for him, it was an experience of enlightenment. If he talked about that in one of his videos. I never read the book, but he did talk about the experience in one of his videos. So, I mean, if Lance has studied the Tibetan Book of the Dead much more than I have, if he wants to say something more about that.
Well, there is a lot to talk about, and I'll be glad to talk about it. Of course, it's not something that can be done in 5 minutes or an hour or anything like that. Uh, but what we've been studying, you see, the point about this is it's levels, right? We've been talking about it's a progressive levels. And if we don't have stability, like I just said 20 minutes ago or so, if we don't have stability at the fundamental levels, then going to these higher levels are going to be dangerous in that you're going to have some kind of you may lose faith in what you're doing. In a very simple way of describing it. Bernie spoke about this woman that, had a very bad experience and everything. And not that we would have that kind of an experience, but the point is, she obviously did not have the fundamentals to be able to handle that higher teaching and practice. So, what we've been trying to emphasize through the talking of the Dharma, the talking of the vocabulary that we've been trying to establish, and the practices that go along with it, we can't go to those other levels successfully. I wouldn't want to do it with you because, you're not ready for it. But if you can show me that you're ready for it, I'll be more than glad to do it. It really comes down to that.
Well, Lance, yesterday when you and I had our conversation afterwards, you gave me like a really good piece of advice. You're like, give your ego a job. You're like, just be wise. You were very practical. So I started doing that today when I caught my mind stream going to negative place. I just said, hey, stop the storyline, just be wise. I started replacing it. A couple years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Like if you had been like, go meditate, like I can see the wisdom in what both you and Bernie are saying. Like I would have been without the fundamentals, rationale, and experiential components leading up to like the conduct, the basic meditation. Like I was able to do it easily today. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to. I'd been like I would have felt bad, like I had failed myself to not immediately have been able to. What does that mean to be wise? To give my ego a job? Because now I'm like, cut it out, just be wise and quickly, like you said, discern what you need to act on, what you need to be quiet on. I got it. Like I started doing that today, and it's wow, brings great forth of peace. So I like I see what you're saying, like because I couldn't have done that.
So the structure, you see, that's the structure. And the structure, begins with the prayers.
Right.
It begins with the prayers. And if we're making up our own prayers and we're kind of deviating because for whatever reason we don't want to do these prayers, well, that's not following this Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana, Mahayana practice. And these prayers and these processes have been developed over the years and so on and honed, to be like medicine and to be like scalpels. You know, they cut through when they need to cut through, and they offer medicine when we need to have medicine. So without doing these things in a committed way, you know, in this way, then you know it's fine. But you got to understand that we can't go further on into things without, taking unnecessary liberties, to put it simply. We have to be prepared to do it. It's like driving a car. If you go to driver's ed, you're going to learn a lot more than if you just get your father gives you the keys to the car and you start driving.
It's a lot. You're right. You're right, Lance. It is the structure. I mean, all this is correct because I'm going through it right now, and it is getting like a doctorate in spirituality.
Yeah.
It's like it's a marathon or an Ironman. It is not a sprint race. You have to settle in and take it slow.
You know, when I first started teaching this at Dharma Surya years ago, there was a woman who said, you know, this is like a college course, you know, and that's exactly right. And that's, you know, it's my approach. I'm not an elementary school teacher or a junior high school teacher or a high school teacher, but I approach it like a college level thing. You all have been to college,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm presenting it to you as if you've been to college and who understand the power of study and the power of workshops and the power of individual, investigation and so on. If you don't do it, you're going to miss it.
This has been a lot cheaper than my other college experience as well. It's a lot more affordable, trust me.
But it's priceless.
A lot more valuable and a lot more affordable.
Yeah.
I grind out these student loans every day like a mini. Neither here nor
So
there. But I was also thinking too that if interest with some of this stuff, you did give a teaching on the Bardo's 1 or 2 weeks teachings a while ago that should be on the YouTube page too, back in the archives, which I'm sure captures a lot of this too.
Yeah, it was a brief introduction.
Well, I am just grateful to have found this path.
Well, thank you. Good. So going back to the book. So bodhicitta is the heart of all this. If you don't have strong bodhicitta, if you are not the embodiment of bodhicitta, then moving on, you see, becomes, tenacious. Because invariably we will meet obstacles, difficulties, confusions. And it's the bodhicitta that gives us the power, that gives us the ability, that gives us the confidence to be able to work through that, to use all the other tools that we've been learning. The bodhicitta is the heart of that. All the enlightened beings that you can imagine, that you can think of, all have bodhicitta in whatever tradition you can imagine, you think of. Doesn't have to be Buddhism, but Christianity, Judaism, whatever. The central figures, those great charismatic figures had bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So this is why we emphasize, this is why we're talking so much about this. We continue to come back to it, but we're really talking about it tonight and last week, and we'll continue next week. So you got to take it to heart, is what I'm trying to say. It's got to become your heart. Does that make sense? Am I not making sense? And what I'm saying isn't these are things that flow through us because we learn these to be true, and now we become the embodiment of that, and it just flows out when we have the opportunity to talk about it.
It reminds me of Christianity. Sorry.
Go right ahead.
If you're not reading the Bible and receiving the sacrament and just doing the basics and trying to live a good Christian life, then you're wasting your time trying to get into St. John of the Cross mysticism and things like that. Quite
And pure
similar.
Christianity is not bad at all. I'm a Christian, I studied it for a long time, and I know the Christ and all that. Any other comments?
I was
Okay.
just gonna say I really like the phrase. I think it was from the Transformation of Suffering. I mentioned it a few times, or it might have been you who said it, Lance. But they say you need to habituate your bodhicitta day in and day out, make that like a habit of your mind. And for some reason, that phrase I have it written on my thing in my office to remind myself that. But I like that. To me, that gets at what you're speaking about in a way that's pithy or something.
Yes, to habituate your bodhicitta. Mhm. Okay, so to understand bodhicitta, we need to break it down and then put it back together again, to help us to understand it, intellectually, and then to be able to experience it through the heart means to practice. If we don't practice bodhicitta, it just stays up here and it's very brittle. It'll break down with when a challenge comes to it. When it's in here, you've got, it's that strength comes from in here. When you feel like you can do something, it's in here that you feel it. You sense it. Up here, you may think you know how to do it, but then this is what gets damaged real fast. So let's go back to this book, page 16. And in this top portion up here is the primary characteristics of bodhicitta. So this is a meditation. Every part of this whole entire book is a meditation. So this particular one here. So do you want to know what ultimate bodhicitta is? Do you want to know what relative bodhicitta is? Well, here it is defined for us. Ultimate bodhicitta, one statement, very simple, says supreme absolute. Ultimate bodhicitta, the supreme bodhicitta, the absolute bodhicitta is the objective to achieve enlightenment, period. The objective to achieve enlightenment. And enlightenment is liberation. The ultimate bodhicitta. The bodhicitta is what a human being has, the wholly enlightened mind for the purpose of attaining enlightenment. The relative bodhicitta, if you look down a few lines lower, you see relative bodhicitta is conventional. Relative meaning conventional, that we agree. We have a convention, and let's define the terms. Well, we all agree that this table is a table and that it's painted a red color and that it's got 4 legs, and we'll call that a table. That's a conventional description and agreement of what we're going to call something. So relative bodhicitta is a conventional understanding of this wholly enlightened mind. So its objective is to benefit sentient beings. The relative, the conventional, is to help other beings, to benefit other beings, sentient beings. It's through the relative that we recognize the absolute or the ultimate or the supreme. We may have some kind of a notion of what the supreme is, what the absolute is. You know, well, we've got this ideal that we think it is or something, but it's here, right? You know, until you get it stable in here, it's just a concept. Getting it stable in here is beyond concept, it's beyond words. And it's through the repeated conduct of the bodhicitta in the relative world, our regular phenomenal world, that we're able to stabilize that which is in here, our recognition of what's in here. It's already there. We just don't believe it. We just don't practice it. So, to go a little further, in the ultimate bodhicitta, it says, it is pervading emptiness endowed with the essence of compassion, clear, unmoving, and free from elaboration. So that's really important, free from elaboration. The more that we try and describe it and think about it and everything, the further away we're pushing it away. We have to rest with it. It's a very important part of realization. We have to rest with it and have that mindful experience within our heart. And when you have it, you know. And when you have it and you know, it may not be stable in the beginning. It's not likely to be, you know. So you lose it, but you got to bring it back. You got to stabilize. So we continue to do the practices and so on. And so when we say, do I have it, is to what degree is it stable? Before you can say, well, I really got it. Or I had a glimpse of it, and that's wonderful. But is it really, is it who I am? Am I the embodiment of that? So don't let your ego get wrapped up in this, because that's what it does. The ego wants identity. The ego wants to be absolute. So one of the qualities of bodhicitta is the humility. You don't have to speak about it. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to prove it to anybody.
Lance, would you say that that's like, so looking at organized religion where people like, I'm Muslim, or like when in Islam, when people wear head covers, like, it's like, oh, I have to, like, sorry to digress to like my example of Islam, but one of the reasons I don't wear a head cover, well, first, it's too hot in Iran when I go there. I'm very uncomfortable, but I don't need that. My sisters and stuff, like, oh, I have to show people like this is my faith, right? And I'm like, why can't you just be a good person? Like I come back, I've had not arguments, I've had debates with my cousins while I'm in Iran, like not wanting to put the head cover on. Like I have to, I don't have a choice, and I don't like it. I don't like that it's not a choice for me. And because like, oh, well, it symbolizes this. And then I'm like, why can't people just judge my action as who I am, as good or bad? So is that what you're talking about? Like, would that apply, like that kind of what you're just saying, like you just are, and so the need to have these things or these rituals is not necessary if you just are whatever that religion dictates?
Sure, it's part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that will help my discussion with my sisters about the head cover. That's my little one-off.
You know, we can get an attached and have aversion to either side of that. You know, oh, you know, I don't wear a hijab, and that's who I am, and that's my identity, and my ego loves that. You know,
I guess that wouldn't be the reason to wear it, is to let other people know that I'm Muslim, right? That can't be the reason you wear the hijab, is like, or cover the hair for that reason, because like that seems false
I
to
think
me.
some people would do it for that reason. I mean, look, Buddhism has their version of that, and Christianity has their version of that. You know, the Jews have their version of that. You know, the uniform that you put on, You know, is it announcing who you think you are, or is it giving you some kind of strength and confidence, you know, and at least for a space and time, it's helping you to develop one-pointed mindfulness that's opening up your heart. And you could be in you know, with a million people at the same time, but the only thing that it's doing is opening up your heart. You have no awareness of other beings.
Do you wear your mala beads all the time?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this statement here, the essence of compassion, clear, unmoving, and free from elaboration. So this is the kind of thing you should write on your wall. You know, this whole section, this box here that has these definitions here, you should write them on your walls. That's how important they are, so that you have an immediate place that you can go to reference these, because they're very subtle. It says here, I got to use a magnifier. It says here, as said by the Buddha in the Clarification of Thought Sutra, one of his teachings, one of the Buddha's teachings, the sutra, the mind of ultimate enlightenment is beyond the world, this world, free from all elaborations, anything that we can say about it. The supremely pure, unstained, subject of the ultimate, stainless, unmoving, and very clear, like the continuity of a lamp sheltered from the wind. So that's a really good metaphor right there, a candle in the wind. If you take a candle out and you go outside and it's a breezy day, and that flame is just flickering, and sometimes it seems like it's going to be extinguished because of the extreme of the breeze that is coming, you know. But if you can put a shield over that, if you can put a glass globe over that, then that flame will just stay straight and will not flicker one bit. So this is an analogy for the ultimate bodhicitta, is being that, you know. So then the relative bodhicitta says, and said in the same sutra, it says, said by the Buddha in the Clarification of Thought Sutra, relative bodhicitta vows, promises, vows to liberate all sentient beings from suffering through compassion, through our compassion. So the ultimate is just being. And the other one is very active. Is the conduct. Is the if the ultimate is the wisdom, then the compassion, or the relative, is the compassion, is manifesting. You know, you can look at it that this whole phenomenal world, as we've said before, is a display for the purpose of the compassion to be able to recognize what the ultimate is, so that we can liberate from this suffering. So that's a pretty far out way of looking at things. But then, you know, it comes into the question of, what does the human mind, what can we comprehend? Can we comprehend these three dimensions? You know, are there 4 dimensions? Are there 5 dimensions? Are there 6 dimensions? Are there 16 dimensions?
Lance, there's definitely 4 dimensions.
Okay, I'll take your
Definitely
word
4.
for it. All right, good. Okay. All right, so here we've defined relative and absolute bodhicitta, and now it requires you're meditating on it. You got to take it apart and you got to put it back together again in your own time, in your own way. But you do that as a result of having done the opening prayers, having done the different recitations that we do and so on like that, to get you into that rare, subtle mind to be able to deal with these kinds of things. If we just look at it and start parsing it and pulling it apart and putting it back together again, we're doing it in the cacophony of what's going on in our lives right now. But to look at it in the subtlety of your transcendent mind requires these stages of developing the meditation.
Lance, as a technical question, have you seen many people be able to do this who have children? Like while their children are young, like under like 8 years old?
Well, it would be, that's a question for, cultures and so on like that. Different cultures, if you're born in a culture that is teaching this, you can have these experiences when you're 13, 14, 15 years old.
It seems like,
and you can have children when you're, 14, 15, 16 years old, and your culture supports that. And so the answer for that might be yes. In our cultures, no, it's very difficult, but
I'm just thinking like my mind is sort of like as you're talking about the relative and absolute and I'm thinking about like the migration of Buddhism to the Western culture and it's a blessing for all of us to be able to be here and be exposed to this content outside of the cultural difficulties it is in the Western world, right? Like where it's go, 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 move, move, move. And the experiences I have with my brother and sister with their lifestyles with their children and thinking, God bless my brother and sister. I don't know that they would ever have this opportunity. So I'm just thinking about, that's why I just asked that question about like how like it's realistically integrated as a lifestyle in the Western society.
well, I can put it in these terms. I was exposed to all this. I had some of my most deepest experiences before I had my daughter. I got one daughter. And knowing that I was entering into parenthood and family and commitment and so on like that, I was very happy that I had those experiences before because, I could focus and so on like that. But then as I continued, I knew that I had to put practices and study to some degree on hold, and because I had to develop the responsibilities of life, to support the family and do the things that we do and everything, knowing that I wouldn't lose what I gained, what I had attained. I wouldn't lose that. And second, that I would be able to go to it in a moment's notice. I could arise that immediately. And that I could re-engage in it wholeheartedly at some point in my life, when my family responsibilities became, satisfied.
It's an interesting question and how you could cultivate this in the Western culture and bring it into kids at a much younger age, right, where it's integrated into the family unit. I'm pondering it as in my role as an aunt to very young children, and I'm just thinking about how
my experience with it, because we've been doing it. That was the first thing we did at Dharma Surya Center was started a children's program, and it was aimed with it started with kids 5 years old to 12 years old. And the kids that were mostly participating were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, maybe. There weren't any kids 11 or 12 at that time. And they were learning memorizing the prayers and everything and listen to the stories of the Buddha and asked intelligent questions and participated very dutifully and everything. It was great, And then they became so that was in 2015. And then as things progressed and everything, then in 2019, 2020, 2021, now those kids were now 13, 14, 15 years old. and they're just not interested right now. To try to get them to commit to this, there might be one or two, but the rest of them were just, oh man, I got my phone, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm too busy, they got all these things that they're getting involved in and so on. And of course, their parents, they're trying to corral their kids. They want them to learn this stuff. But at this point right now, teenagers, they become something else. And we got to understand human nature to be able to allow that to not upset us or to rock the boat or to lose focus. They'll come back to it. We have faith that they'll do it. We've seen it over and over again. That's the way things seem to operate. The teenage years are a time of rebellion, and I mean, I don't know how you were when you were a teenager, but I certainly know how.
I was a good child, Lance. You would have been proud of me. I didn't do drugs or drink. I stayed at home and got all those A's and went off to college at 16. It was ingrained. I didn't have a choice also.
Well, and that's wonderful, but that's a rare child.
Yeah.
That's a rare child, and thank goodness for that. So I'm just pointing out that one of the things that we need to be able to understand is what it is to have this body, to be in this the 12 links of interdependent origination. We've talked about that. What it is to go through life with those 12 links and so on. What it is to have the 5 skandhas. What it is to have the personality of a human being and so on, and understanding that and bringing that onto the path. Not letting it disturb the path,
Yeah, I can't imagine any other way to be at this point. Like, I can't imagine going back, like reversing.
So, I've been seeing a lot lately, about people thinking about what artificial intelligence is and all this stuff and what's going to happen in the next 20, 30, 40 years and so on. And the spiritual side of things is up to people like us who have a taste of spirituality, and to whatever degree of influence we have, we need to exercise that, because they're not going to get it from their phones. They're not going to get it from TikTok. They're not going to get it from those kinds of sources, from the outside sources that are pulling things apart. We need to instill the core of the spirituality. That's our job.
I agree. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my opportunity to be of service to humanity.
Okay, so let me go back to this. So the 2 truths, we've talked about the 2 truths one time or another. So the 2 truths in respect to the absolute and the relative bodhicitta is, the first truth is the wish to remove the suffering of all beings without exception by bringing all beings to full enlightenment. The truth of helping all beings. The second truth is the absolute true nature. So the first is this cacophony of stuff that we're working with in this chaotic world, and for us to try and bring it together to kind of have a sense of it, and be able to see the absolute true nature in that, to see that it is an expression of the true nature. And what has been missing is the core of the true nature itself. So without the core, things are flying apart. We need to energize the core. And the core by itself, if will bring it in, will magnetize it, will bring it in. We talked about, the 4 enlightened qualities not long ago: pacification, enrichment, magnetizing, and subduing. So we need to be able to engage in those enlightened activities, which is energizing, which is the core, to bring these disparate things all back together again. So the two truths, the truth of the relative, the truth of the absolute. It says here, finally, that the ultimate bodhicitta is obtained through the realization of dharmata, which is the suchness, the true nature of phenomena, the dharmata, the truth of the true nature of this phenomenal nature is the display of the absolute. It's pure already. You know, we're the ones who misinterpret it and make it what we think it is. We who do all the corruptions and so on like that, all the perversions and everything. But itself as it is, it's pure all by itself. So ultimate bodhicitta is obtained through the realization of dharmata, the suchness, the true nature of phenomena, while relative bodhicitta is obtained through ritual ceremony. Now there's something, there's a clue, there's a key, ritual ceremony. So for those of us who don't like to do the structure, who don't believe in the structure, who go and say ritual, oh no, I don't practice that. That's for somebody else. That's cultism or something like that. And don't recognize what the ritual ceremony brings is being able to organize, is being able to understand, is being able to bring that that relative nature, see it for what it is, as being on the path, as being part of the path, as being the path, all of that. So the relative nature which is obtained through ritual ceremony. So these ritual ceremonies that we do are all ways of being able to focus our one-pointed mindfulness on our spirituality. So if you have an altar, if you're lighting candles in the morning, if you're lighting incense, if you're pouring water into the bowls, and you're saying prayers, you're reciting prayers and doing those kinds of things, you're doing prostrations, all that is ritual ceremony. You're starting your day by doing these things. And then when you do the deity yoga practices or the Om Ahom purification practice, are all ritual ceremony to bring our body, speech, and mind. Isn't that what we say all the time? Body, speech, and mind. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the enlightened ones who already know this, who are the embodiment of this. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with them. Why? For the benefit of the enlightenment of all other beings, relative bodhicitta. So then the last definition here is emptiness, as the lack of inherent reality of a phenomena or a person. We see all this as relative. It is not absolute. It is not permanent. It is a display of that, but it is a display that we apprehend and we give all these conventional meanings to. And if we're just looking at all the outside stuff and not at the core of what it is, from where it comes, then you see, it flies apart. So the emptiness is the description, the conceptual description we give to this phenomenal nature as not having a permanent existence of its own. All this stuff is relative and will change. So any more thoughts, concept, conversation you want to have?
What is the relationship between relative bodhicitta and lack of inherent So what it sounds like is that we are more free to help others and to want to benefit other sentient beings, because ultimately the stakes aren't really that high, as even though we think they are, because everything changes and everything is temporary and impermanent and perhaps not real. Am I getting that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
We've created a false importance. And that which is important, the most important thing that we're talking about, is inexpressible. And that's what makes it difficult. That's why it takes so much work for us to be able to cut through all the junk, to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, to get to the core and realize, oh, here it is. The simplicity of it, the beauty of it was there the whole time. That's the important thing.
Like, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff, right? So another way of saying it.
Yeah, you could say it that way, but the small stuff is what are the eight worldly concerns.
Yes.
It's what we're thinking about all the time. Matt, what do you think of this?
I don't know. I don't know if I really have anything so much to add or ask. Just yeah, just taking it in. The
Okay.
the importance of the bodhicitta and the two truths, and yeah, I don't know. I don't really have.
I'm not trying to pry,
Yeah, please.
but I think that you're a young man. You're about to engage in a marriage and everything. And how does this land on you going forward with all of that?
Um, I mean, in reference to what Zara was talking about before, about having a
Well,
family and how that would work with the practice, or just
yeah, I mean, you and your life and how you view your life, the rest of your life and everything. How does this land with, what part of this becomes part of that?
um, I mean, the goal would be to make all of this be part of that. I mean, I do worry on some level of, particularly having kids or starting a family, how that will affect my ability to practice. But uh, but I don't know. I could see that also softening me or my heart as well, to have a kid in a way that I do think can be beneficial potentially to the practice, from what I've seen with other people that I've known who've had kids. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I think I don't see like really necessarily a contradiction uh, in walking the path and having the worldly responsibilities, as long as you can have enough time to practice and try to integrate it. And you know it definitely sets some limitations, though, for sure. I don't know if that really gets at the spirit of what you're asking or not, but
Okay, no, it's good. Brendan, I got to ask you, basically the same question, but you're in a slightly different situation because you're 10 years or more, into the process of having a family. But you did have, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but you had a pretty strong spiritual background, you know, and how does this square with all of that, your situation?
So I have 5 kids. My oldest is 18, my youngest is 11. And you learn a word when you become a parent, which is opportunity cost. I almost never go to the movies. I rarely watch TV, football game now and then. And it's all about what you prioritize. I prioritize my kids, my wife, my job, and because I have to, and and Buddhism as well. I wasn't a Buddhist when these children were conceived, by the way.
You say you were, or you were not?
I was not
Right.
when they were conceived. Yeah. Uh,
But you did have
the-
a spirituality, didn't you?
I did. Yes, I did. Certainly. Uh, the other thing I will say is you just talked about the 8 worldly concerns, Lance. And when you're a parent, the thought of something happening to one of your kids or not being able to provide for them is terrifying. And it's a source of tremendous anxiety for me, which is one reason I got into Buddhism in the first place, was to try to be relieved of some of that anxiety. And one thing I've learned is a lot of this stuff is just in your head. It's a threat. You can never prove with 100% certainty that something won't happen, but it's usually exaggerated in our monkey minds, of which mine is a real monkey. So I don't know if that answered anything that you were asking, Lance, but yeah, you can make time for the practice. Matthew, you're not going to sleep much the first few months, so I mean that's when you can practice, is when between when
Well,
the baby's up.
you mean having a child, you mean?
Oh yeah, well yeah, if he has a child, yeah, that'll definitely teach you patience. Let's put it that way.
Well, let me ask the question this way: Do you see that the Buddhism or any spiritual philosophy
Mhm.
can be part of your everyday, family life and so on?
Yes,
They're not
yes, it
mutually
can.
exclusive.
No, they're not mutually exclusive. I think in the West, I think the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, you're probably going to be, in broader company in the West, more socially acceptable to go to church on Sunday morning, for example. But other than that, yeah, I see no reason that you couldn't integrate whatever spirituality you have with your family.
Thank you.
Hey,
You're
Lance,
welcome.
I should say, a stepson who's 19, and I've known him since I was 3. Blake and I, his name is Orion, and he was part of all the things we did, like little things, like we brought him with us to to practice down the downtown temple, and he was part of some of the things that we did. We integrated him in. So, but it was just one child, right? So the ratio was 2 adults to 1 child modeling behaviors. And I think it's the more kids you have, like I'm just noticing it's harder to integrate it into part of like the lifestyle the family has. It seems that way, at least what I've seen. But we did do that with Orion.
Are you talking about the Buddhism, or are you talking about?
Yeah. Like lifestyle habits that supported integration of like giving back. Like we would like have like specific rituals we did, and we discussed them. He was part of meditation practice, like doing certain service projects for the community, and we explained to him what we were doing and why. And he wasn't given a choice at a certain point. Like you just have to come and trust us. But Blake and I were in unison. It helps when your partner is in unison with you with your spiritual pathway. It makes it so much easier. So that was a blessing for Blake and I to be integrated in that way and have that symmetry.
I think it's an important point. Mark, how about you? You have any comments about this? I know you've been paying attention thoughtfully and wonder what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, as I read the words, it's all very simple. It's easy to understand. I can identify with what I read. I can see what's going on, but then as you illuminate things through the conversation and through your explanation of things, I could easily say, let's do this again and to revisit this whole primary characteristics of Bodhicitta. Because to me, this is the heart of Buddhism, or that's how it feels, at least to me. And I would be happy if you and I, or you and the rest of us did this again next week, because it's so germane. So, I mean, that's where I'm at. If I just read it, the two truths, I read the ultimate bodhicitta is obtained through the realization of dharmata. Okay, I get it. But it's the underlying conversation that makes this stuff important and gives it meaning. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and there's 2 more pages here to talk about. So, yes, we're going to continue this next week and use what we talked about last week and use what we're talking about tonight as, more of the platform or different levels on the platform. And we're going to be, bringing more of it, and together with each other and so on. So more of the puzzle pieces are going to fit together, I think.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. And I look forward to the next 2 sessions on this, the characteristics of bodhicitta.
And I'd also like to say that, we talk about that this is a circular, presentation. In other words, we go through this at least once a year, twice a year, sometimes maybe 3 times a year. And those who have been with us for, that period of time recognize that we've been through this a bunch of different times. And each time, maybe there's a different way that we say it, there's a different refreshment, there's a different understanding of what it means, there's a different relevance in which we can, because we've had to experience it in real world, and how this works and so on. So my point is saying that we do go through this over and over and over again. And that's what allows us to go like a spiral to the next level. And
Yeah,
then from that level, we go to the next level and so on. But
yeah,
this is at the basic level, and understanding bodhicitta is, at the core of this.
yes. So I mean, I got that much at least. I had a friend who was a young physician, and I asked him how one could learn so much in order to be of use to other human beings as a physician, and his answer was one word: repetition.
Yes.
And I feel like that's the path I'm on here. That it's, so much of this is extremely subtle. It really is subtle. And as I say, reading the words is easy, and getting a glimpse of what's meant is easy. But having it fill the void is a whole other event. And that's the part I want to keep. That's why I want to keep repeating. And I'm happy to do that with you or with the group or whatever.
Well, thank you. And this is where the Sangha is important. This is where you talk about the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Sangha is the community of people that are supporting each other in all these different ways that you're talking about. So, yeah. So, and when we first talked and met and everything, we talked about the fellowship. And that was a prime reason that we're together now, for you and me and the rest of us, I think, has been the fellowship, because we want to be with people like ourselves, and this is part of the king of aspirations. It talks a lot about surrounding yourself with the community, so we're doing the right things.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you're all here. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Bernie, would you like to wind up with any thoughts, comments? How has bodhicitta affected your life?
Well, of course, I'm not a parent, so I can't talk to that particular problem. How's bodhicitta affected my life? Well, it's something I put some effort in trying to develop. You need to understand what bodhicitta is. It starts with love and compassion, and it grows through an awareness of the Dharma in order to realize that the only true solution to the problem of unhappiness in the world is for people to change their minds, to come to some kind of realization. because otherwise we just keep chasing our tails, and there's no end to the problems that can arise. Obviously, I don't want to dismiss people helping on a physical level as well, but most of our suffering, at least in the West, comes at the mental level, and to solve that requires some understanding of the mind. So it makes this a very precious teaching. Now, that doesn't apply to me personally. I don't know what to say about my personal experience of bodhicitta, but except to say I hope that it's grown over the years. So I just would have to leave it at that.
Okay, well, thank you. So we have to remember, the loving kindness, the compassion, the joy. There should be joy in this.
Yeah, joy is funny. Joy is often translated as enthusiasm for the practice. It's like one understands the importance of it, and therefore one is enthusiastic in the practice, and that from that, out of that, there arises a sense of joy. Now, okay, I just ran into something the other week. This is getting late, but I just want to say it anyway. But there was a quote from Rudolf Steiner again, listening to one of his audiobooks. He said, if we were to talk to an ancient wise man from the Far East, from the East, he would look at our civilization, he would say, your civilization is based on fear. And out of that fear, it's very easy to turn into hate. Our civilization is based on joy. And out of that joy, it's very easy to develop a sense of love. So I found that very meaningful. So, and that really hits the nail on the head. To so much these days I find online, everybody's afraid of everything, and it's a bad mental attitude to sink into, fear. And I see it constantly. So I try to avoid that, try to make people fearful and try to be fearful myself. So try to bring joy into people's lives rather than frighten them and bring fear into their lives. So
that's really great. Thanks for saying that. That's really great. Yes. And the last of which, we have equanimity for those who agree with us or don't agree with us. All right. Unless somebody has something else that they'd like to close with, we'll do our dedication prayers. So I'd like to recite the dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun on page 21 in the book. So if you will join me in that recitation, please. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, the fine assembly of Yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much for this meeting we had today. It was very
Thank you very much, Lance. As always, I greatly admire your knowledge and the fact that you help us.
well. You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bernie, as well. Thank you.
Yes, Bernie.
Thank you, Bernie.
Very hard. So we'll see each other. We can see each other on Thursday for Medicine Buddha practice, and then Sunday. And thank you so much.
Thank you.